After a lapse of a year and in the absence of a full-fledged government in place, Lebanon has finally named a prime minister to form a cabinet on ward of total economic collapse. Now, this is the third nomination since the government of Hassan Diab resigned in the wake of a massive explosion at Beirut's port last August. Najib Mikati has promised transparency and reforms. There are dire shortages of pharmaceuticals, fuel, and electricity. The national currency has also lost 95% of its value. Is Mikati able to form a cabinet at last? And if so, what's the cabinet going to have to do with all the predicaments besetting the country? We'll put those issues and relevant ones in the spotlight tonight. For an update, let's go to Press TV's Mariam Saleh in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, for an update on the latest there. Mariam, over to you.
Well, first, the latest is that we had a meeting between Prime Minister-designate Mr. Najib Mikati and President Michel Aoun, and the Prime Minister-designate stressed that these meetings will be continuous, perhaps even on a daily basis, in order for there to be a quick formation of the cabinet, which is very necessary at this point. And what we're hearing from today from all the parliamentarians, the members of parliament, and some of them are also previous ministers and so on, they've lived through so many cabinets, and they're stressing that the situation could not be worse than it is right now in Lebanon, with the situation that you mentioned, the lack of fuel, lack of medicine, and so on and so forth, and the fact that the prices are rising hysterically. So therefore, there needs to be a stop to this economic collapse, as everyone is calling it, the worst since the 1850s, and that is something that is extremely grave and extremely critical. And this is why we see that now there's a push from all the sides to form this cabinet. There seems to be that support, that internal support. At the same time, there is a certain foreign, if we may say, push or also encouragement that you should form the cabinet, and we'll give you all the assistance that you need.
Okay, thanks for that, Mariam Saleh, Press TV correspondent in Lebanon. Now, as you see, we're discussing Lebanon in this edition of The Spotlight. I'm your host, Behrouz Najafi, and joining me tonight will be author and researcher in strategic and political affairs, Ali Hamie in Beirut. And we'll have Professor of Law and Political Science at NDU University, Eugene Sensenek, also in Beirut. Good to have you both, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Now let's go to Ali. After months of political deadlock, Najib Mikati has been appointed as prime minister. And this as the Lebanese protesters have been demanding someone from outside of the ruling political elite whom they see responsible for bankrupting the country. Is Mikati able to form a government? And if so, could he be considered a savior for Lebanon?
Good evening. First of all, it's not a coincidence to choose Prime Minister Mikati for this post at this time. Previously, he was chosen also in 2005 as a mediator and a middleman between the 8th and 14th of March parties. And since then, he served as like a heel person to the situation. This one of good points, you know, it can be marked for Mr. Mikati. And then he was appointed in 2011 also as a prime minister, since, you know, after the resignation of Prime Minister Hariri. The problem is in Lebanon now, we cannot like choose better than Mikati, because maybe, I'm talking in the, you know, on behalf of the politician, not the people, because the people has another idea about Mikati and the whole leaders in Lebanon. Prime Minister Mikati in 2011 and during his era, let's say, the vessel of death that exploded later on seaport of Beirut was at his time when it was entered. This is the first point of bad images of what we have kind of leaders in Lebanon, and among them is Mr. Mikati. The second thing is Mr. Mikati is very involved in corruption in Lebanon, and it's not only my opinion. It's like what we can see, like from like borrowing from banks, like about $400 million worth of debt with
Okay.
banks. And but the best of worst now we have, okay, the best of worst that we have in Lebanon is Mr. Mikati.
Okay.
We passed through an experience with Prime Minister Hariri that he was resigned in 2019. And we have Mustafa Adib after Hassan Diab, Prime Minister Hassan Diab. Most of those people are very afraid to be sanctioned by United States. That's why it's very hard for them to form a government.
Okay. Now, let me,
Prime Minister
Ali,
Mikati will face. Prime Minister
we'll come to
Mikati
other
will
points,
face like
Ali,
several.
if you allow me. So let me ask Eugene what he thinks about this, because protesters want somebody outside of what they call the oligarchy, and Mr. Mikati is just there. And he's been, of course, leading the country twice, like you said, as prime minister, 2005, 2011. Now, this time around, the situation seems to be much worse. Can he handle this properly this time, Eugene?
Well, that's a good question. If you want to ask about his competencies and whether he's able to do things right and effectively, I would agree with Ali Hamie. He is definitely able to do what he sets out to do. The question is, what is he going to set out to do? If you look at his home district in Tripoli, it's a mess. He and a couple of his cronies have driven this beautiful city into the ground. It has an airport, it has a harbor, it has a train station, it has an oil refinery, and a world-class fairgrounds, which are all in disrepair. This is Mikati's world. So is he going to take his skills in business, in the speculation sector, in construction and in communications, where he and his brother have made literally billions of dollars, and serve the country? If he chooses to do so, he's our man. He also enjoys, I think, the respect of all sides, including the United States. He was brought forward by Hezbollah. He has the backing of Hariri. So I think he can do it. I think he will set out and achieve whatever those goals are. Now, whether he's going to stand up to the corrupt forces in the country, he could. I mean, the situation is so dire at the moment that I think even the ruling elites are starting to get worried. Look, their children have to go to school and breathe the same air that our children breathe, right. And eat the same poisoned food and not get access. We can't, even with the fresh dollars, Lebanon's recent gift to the English language, even with the dollars coming from outside the country, you can't buy the medicines you need, even if you have the dollars. So I hope he sets out to save the country. If he does, he can do it.
Okay. Now, Ali, the Lebanese economy has been in a tailspin, horrible situation there. The currency has lost most of its value in a year. So what could Mr. Mikati's priorities be to remedy this situation?
The problem is we have experienced Mr. Mikati and the others. You know what? He was nominated by the former Prime Minister's Council. And this gives us an idea of what Mr. Mikati can do. First of all, it's a very heavy situation that he cannot tolerate it. First of all, we can say if he may be accepted by all parties and by all parties in Lebanon or communities. And second of all, he has to face the economy disaster and currency inflation and the sea boundaries. And we don't have to forget the declaration statements of the government. Could he make it? Could they form it? We know that what we call them 8th of March parties, the golden rules, the golden statements of people, army, and resistance, and how we can that be dealt by him. If he can collect all those problems and solve it, this is one in one hand, but the heaviest load that he can, if he can manage it, the seaport explosion in Beirut. I think what's going on in Lebanon now, it's just to pass the time in order to bypass the 4th of August, so people will not be on the street against any form of government. Mr. Mikati, I think it's very heavy load on him. If he can do it, he must be supported by all Lebanese parties, all Lebanese people to do so. But before he was prime minister, could he do that? He could not do anything. And we were like having so much like funds coming from everywhere. Now we are under $100 billion, you know, in worst economy debt in history of Lebanon.
Right.
I don't think he can manage to do so fast. And beside that, we have also what's coming in a few months, the parliament election. Okay, can he manage to do that? Can he manage to satisfy all parties in Lebanon?
Yeah, that's a big question first. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Eugene, Ali mentioned the horrible situation, the dire economic situation there. And so what went wrong? What made Lebanon reach this stage? And what reforms are needed?
This might sound counterintuitive, but I would say nothing went wrong and everything went right. This is what they wanted to do. This is what they set out to do. And they achieved their goals. Lebanon has so many resources inside and outside the country. Lebanon is not Bangladesh or Haiti or something. Lebanon is a country, if they want, they can solve because I've been living here for 22 years, since 1999. We can solve our problems like that if we want to. The problem is, the bad news is, we can solve our problems like that, but we choose not to. Now, Mikati is a very competent man, so I am absolutely convinced he can deal with the issue. This was brought up, the sea border with Israel, and the issue of oil and natural gas. This is indicative of the problem. This is about good governance. If we decide to have good governance in the oil and gas sector, we can turn this thing around. And the whole issue of foreign relations. Here again, I think he has the ties to the different players in the world that he can pull this off. The restructuring, indicative of this, is the port. Are we going to rebuild the port, or are we going to allow Haifa and the Israelis to take over the Levant and the sea lanes? The Beirut port is the key, is the gateway to the Levant. Since for the last 150 years, it was built to connect Beirut to Damascus and the hinterland. Haifa will take over if we don't do anything about it. And these deals that the Gulf states are now making with Israel, that's not going to stop. That's going to get worse. And finally, I would want to bring up the issue of asset recovery. We have, we don't really know how much, but at least $20 billion in assets which were stolen from the banks, including my life savings. And we need to go out, just like any West African banana republic, and bring it back. Lebanon is a banana republic in this respect, and the foreign players are allowing them to get away with it.
Right.
I would say there's complicity on the part of the international players on this issue. So if we can get the assets that are outside the country and bring them back, and the assets that are hidden within the country, we can solve the country. We can solve the country's problems very quickly. And Mikati's our man. If he chooses, he's our man.
Okay, Ali, let's look at France. France has offered this initiative based on which millions of dollars of international aid has been pledged. And the initiative is conditional, of course, on the implementation of some widespread reforms all across different aspects of government. So, but the question is, if Paris, isn't Paris responsible at least partly for the current mess that Lebanon is grappling with now?
You asking me, Mr. Najafi? Hello.
Yes, Ali, go ahead.
Yes. You know what? Every party in Lebanon is related to a foreign country, and but we in Lebanon, the most important for Lebanese is France, because we call it the mother of Lebanon, or the motherland of Lebanon, whatever. Since 1991, and we were supported by France, and we get so many We were funded like so many times by Paris 1, 2, 3, Cedars, and whatsoever. And we didn't have any plan, how we're gonna repay this amounts later on. The problem is, especially France, and since Jacques Chirac, and then Sarkozy, Hollande, and now Macron, they saw what's going on, and they still seeing what's going on, but they let what's going on just to take its long distance, if we may say, call it. We have so many corrupted leaders, and they are no shame. With no shame, they are doing it. They're still doing it, and most of the countries now that they are asking for us to reheal, they were involved in our corruptions.
Okay. Now, Eugene, Mikati is supposed to follow on the French initiative. Is that the solution for the Lebanese issues and woes?
The French plan is good. It's a year old. They could have done this at any time. I think that the window of opportunity from January 2020 until the last year was an opportunity that was wasted. Civil society is complicit in this mess, in this disaster. Civil society was asleep at the wheel throughout the first half of last year, and they are at fault as well. I would say, as far as France is concerned, it's true. Ali Hamie said this correctly, that we all have ties to France, to France, to Russia, more recently the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia. This is the normal Lebanese approach, and I think it's also the problem to always call in daddy when we have problems that we can solve ourselves. We have the resources in this country, and most importantly, if you want to look at the foreign resources, it's the Lebanese diaspora. We have so many good Lebanese who have left the country, who would love to come back and help build the country. And with COVID-19, we've seen this happening online. So the offline merge online, or OMO world, makes it even easier for us to link up with the diaspora and really introduce the one thing that will save the country, which is rule of law. And that's all we need. We need to respect the rules and apply them, because when Lebanese go abroad, they're really good. The problem is the culture of impunity within this country, and Mikati has a choice. I mean, he can either continue to go along this road and lead us to the ultimate disaster, or he can turn it around, and he can turn it around very easily with the resources we have.
Okay. Ali, we talked about France now.
The leaders are corrupted. I think the system is corrupted. The whole system needs to be changed. Because most of corrupted people in Lebanon, and the corruptions and the misleadings were like under the law, not above the law. So legally, they did all the corruptions in Lebanon.
Okay, Ali, also, I want to ask you about the U.S. Where is the U.S. in this?
United States, usually, the most important for United States in the region is the security of the Zionist entity. And what's the most important for the U.S. is to save the sea boundaries with Lebanon now. Okay, and if we may say and remember that on the 17th and before the 17th of October 2019, some big American politician came to Lebanon, and he said, either we solve the Lebanese boundary or starvation. Lebanon will go into starvation, and that's what we are going through now. They didn't say we will be a poor country. They didn't say that we will be only like corrupted country. They say we will be starved. And that's what we are passing by. We are not allowed to import like oil from Iran or Iraq. We are not allowed to deal with Syria. Of course, we have on the southern boundary, we have our enemy. So we are totally seized by United States. And what's, amazed me that some people in Lebanon will accuse the resistance in Lebanon by having people going so down and in need. We can blame only, by my opinion, we can only blame who put us into sanction and seized the country, the whole country from all around borders, from all sides.
Now, Eugene, isn't it high time that this traditional sectarian consensus system of governance be abolished?
Oh, that's that is the question. First of all, I just want to say, Ali, I agree the system is corrupt, but I would disagree. The system is not corrupt; it is corruption. Corruption is systemic. The corruption is the system. So it's so ingrained in the culture. And the sea borders, I just want to mention that in passing, but I'll get back to that. Corruption is closely linked to sectarianism, not confessionalism. Lebanon is a very diverse country, and each group needs its respective representation. Confessionalism is a good thing. Sectarianism is the abuse of difference. And this is a system that does not have to be. There were many, many periods in Lebanese history where the differences led to coexistence. So we can go back to that. There are people who thrive on abusing differences within the country, whether they're language or religion or skin color. We know different countries have different types of diversity. I know that Iran has a very interesting model for diversity, relatively well respected around the world. So I would say that diversity is not the problem. It's the abuse of diversity to cause fights within the groups and to feed on corruption. Just the issue of the sea borders, I think that's actually an issue for hope as well. No matter who you are in Lebanon, you have a certain grudging respect for Hezbollah. What they did in 2006 was amazing. I mean, we all know that. So the Israelis are willing to negotiate because of the resistance and the sea border. They have to. Oil and gas investments, especially gas investments, are long term. So they have to, if they're going to go forward with their plans for the Arab Gulf, and that's the American game plan now, it's Israel and the Gulf, they have to have peace of some sort with Lebanon. So I would say the resistance is actually a good thing in our international relations with the U.S.
Okay, unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Author and researcher in strategic and political affairs, Ali Hamie, joined us from Beirut, and also from Beirut, professor of law and political science with NDU University, Eugene Sensenik, joined us with his contribution. Thank you for watching. This is Spotlight. I've been your host, Behruz Najaf, and I'll see you next time.